Well, today is my sister Nancy Sue's birthday. God rest her soul. May she forever rest in peace. A victim of ALS. And today's podcast is going to focus entirely on that. We're going to be talking to the people from ALS of Iowa. But I wanted to talk about my sister a little bit. Missing her, obviously, because of her birthday. But this was particularly tragic, and I'll explain why. When we were kids growing up, my dad was an alcoholic. He was abusive. I don't think he would argue about the fact that he was alcoholic. He later joined Alcoholics Anonymous. You got to stand up and tell the world about it when you belong to that organization. And my mom put up with that for many, many years, long enough to get 3 boys out of the house. She finally had enough and picked up and left, my mom did, with Nancy Sue in tow when Nancy was just a teenager. And that is very unsettling for teenage children, particularly teenage girls. And I think she suffered from it somewhat. Her early life was very difficult because of that situation. She got married to a fine man eventually, had a couple of kids, got them out of the house, and went into hopefully an early retirement on a lake home down in Missouri. And then that diagnosis, ALS, claimed her life before I think she actually enjoyed what could have been the best years of her life, which adds to that tragedy, because there was a lot of the early part of her life, through no fault of her own, that really was not the best. And so today is Nancy Sue's birthday, and we're going to honor her memory by talking about the folks, talking to the folks from ALS of Iowa in a podcast interview that I did in their offices. So let's go to that. Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome to another podcast by George. Well, the topic today is ALS, and more specifically ALS of Iowa. And I guess to get us started, I'll put a little bit of a personal perspective on this. I've talked about it previously on a podcast by George, but to bring folks up to speed as to how I got involved in all of this, my best friend, Joe, 10 years ago, his wife is in downtown and has trouble stepping up on a curb. And very shortly thereafter comes the diagnosis, ALS. And a very short period of time, seemed very short to us anyway, Lisa passes away, and my heartbroken friend dies a year later in a motorcycle accident. So that was my initial exposure to this dreaded disease. And then not too long after that, I get a call from my sister. This would have been probably 5 years ago, and she wanted to know if we had any neurology issues in the family. And I said, well, not that I know of. Like I tell people, I've always had mental problems, but I don't know of any neurology issues. And she says, oh, I can't turn the ignition on my car. And I said, oh, that's bad. I know that's bad. You got to get that looked at. And she did. And the diagnosis was ALS. Unbelievably, having just gone through that experience with Joe and Lisa, my sister had ALS. And in a year, she's on a ventilator, and it's game over. ALS claims another victim, and it's my kid sister, 12 years my junior. And the one thing I learned about that, there's no rules to the ALS. The ALS doesn't care. I mean, not that it should have, it should have been me. It doesn't make any difference. ALS, I think, is still undefeated, and that's why I wanted to do a podcast on that particular topic, have a show where we just discussed ALS. And joining me on a podcast by George today, an old friend of mine, Sarah Ledow, the engagement coordinator for ALS of Iowa, and we're joined by Josh Nuss. Delighted to have Josh. Josh is the executive director of ALS of Iowa. So, I'm just going to throw it open to either one of you that wants to talk about that. That's my personal experience with this dreaded disease. I just kind of want to bring people up to date on the disease itself to start with. We heard a lot about ALS with the bucket challenges a couple of years ago. Don't hear so much about it anymore. A lot of people may think that there's been a partial cure or some cure for this, but as I said, my experience or thinking is ALS, old man ALS, the scourge of a disease, is still undefeated. Nobody's got out alive yet. Is that right?
No, you're right. ALS is still 100% fatal. We did have a treatment, the first one in 22 years, approved in May of 2017 called Radicava to treat ALS, and it's been slow progression by an average of 33%. So some folks it helps more, some it doesn't help as much. We're still getting a lot of data around that. It was actually something approved overseas and then fast-tracked through the FDA here in the United States. So there are now 2 drugs to treat ALS. Not a cure, not necessarily a treatment that everybody is able to take depending on where they're at in their progression, but it's hope in the right direction. We hear about things all the time coming from our national office and our researchers about what's going on. There are a lot of things, a lot of irons in the fire. The Ice Bucket Challenge was a game changer. Changed the entire landscape of the fight against ALS. Got a lot of people involved, both on the research front, but also on the technology front and how to make living with ALS, giving them a little bit more, empowering people with ALS, I guess, to live their lives to the fullest through technology, whether it's speech generating devices or different tech to help them with their daily living. But no, it's still 100% fatal. So like you said, it's still undefeated, but its days are numbered is the way we feel.
I hope so. Now, the bucket challenges, are they really over with? Are people still doing those? Why don't we hear much about that anymore?
It was really a phenomenon in 2014, and I started right as it was ending. But of course, I took the Ice Bucket Challenge. Sarah was here through the Ice Bucket Challenge, and the years following it, we tried to see if we could do it again. Because we didn't start the Ice Bucket Challenge, we were just really the lucky beneficiaries of these people that were doing the challenge to think about us as the leading ALS organization in the fight against ALS and to donate to us, raise a ton of awareness. But in the years following, and Sarah knows this because she was in development at the time, we tried to do it again. Some folks did. It didn't raise as much money. Some people would just do it to raise awareness. But here in Iowa, it really did become more of a corporate thing. We were having companies and businesses take it, some team building things. They'd get 10, 20, 30, 40 people from their company to take it, maybe raise a little bit of money. And then over the last couple of years, it's just changed. This year we did an event called Bucket Your Boss, where we tried to recruit local managers, bosses, CEOs.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Yeah. And their job was to raise, like $100 or more. And then we went to Cowles Commons and turn the fountains on and just doused everybody. Raised a little under $10,000. So we're hoping that's something that grows. Next year is the 5-year anniversary of the Ice Bucket Challenge. Oh. So we're hoping to gain a little bit of momentum from that, and hopefully people will think of it again and maybe start it up, because all it takes is one spark to get that thing rolling again, because that's how it started in the beginning.
This is a great group here in Des Moines, the Iowa branch. Sarah, clarify that for me, because I've always been, what's the difference between a national ALS and then like an Iowa association?
So the ALS Association Iowa chapter is affiliated with our national association, but we're a locally owned and operated 501c3. We participate in revenue share with our national office, which means it's 13.5% of every dollar we receive goes to our national office to help with research and help with advocacy. So working on Capitol Hill to try to get legislation through regarding, whether it be Medicare laws, financing of treatments, cures, things with the FDA, whatever. We have a lot of people working in advocacy in Washington, D.C. as well. And that's the 13.5%. It helps with all of that. So it's kind of more of the global stuff. But here in Iowa, as I mentioned, the lion's share of the money that we raise stays local to help Iowans living with ALS because we want to cure just as much as anybody, but we understand there's a lot of people living with ALS currently that won't be around for a cure. And so our main focus is making quality of life for them while they're living with this disease, and just helping their families and them to be, have a little stress relief while they're living with this horrible disease.
Yeah, and it is a scourge. It is horrible. I went through it. And I hear all the time from people that have mental breakdowns, basically, over the death of their pet. Well, wait till it's a family member and a slow type of death, this progressive disease that claims these lives. I mean, it's a horrible thing to be involved in. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people listening to this podcast that have been touched by it, that have been affected by ALS. It seems like more all the time, but I think you clarified that for me some time ago. There really isn't more ALS today. We're just more aware of it, or we're living longer, so more people are affected by it. It's not getting worse, is what I'm saying, or is it?
The last thing I heard, and Josh can maybe clarify this for me, but that we don't see a higher rate. It's just I think more people are talking about it. And the other thing to think about, too, is that people with technology today, people are getting diagnosed sooner than they would have. Like, so let's say, 30 years ago, somebody struggles for 2 years with issues before they finally get an ALS diagnosis, and then, they pass away in a year. Now, maybe they're getting diagnosed within 2 months, and so they're living with it longer. But I mean, Josh, do you have any new information on that?
No, more people are aware of it since 2014 in the Ice Bucket Challenge. I think that's a big part. Also, our our partnership with our ALS clinics in Iowa, we're seeing more and more people come through our clinic, so they're getting to our association faster, whereas before maybe they didn't become aware of us in time or early enough. But we are serving more people than we've ever served in the past. Now, whether that's an awareness thing or more cases, we just don't know. But the thing with ALS, and the reason we're a rare disease, is because it is a 2 to 5 year diagnosis once they're diagnosed, as far as how long they're projected to live with the disease. Some it's shorter, some it's longer. It's just kind of an average. But we're always meeting new people because folks are diagnosed. Unfortunately, they live with the disease and pass, and then more people are being diagnosed. So the reason it's rare is because at any given time in Iowa, there's around 200 to 250 people living with ALS. So the prevalence is tough to figure out because it's always changing. 250
people each year. And I know, too, that have succumbed to it. And my sister was a year or less, but that's important. It's 2 to 5 years. That's kind of the window. And when the diagnosis comes in, you automatically think, well, I'm going to make 5. Or my sister's tough. I mean, she always was. She'll make over 5. Now, ALS doesn't care. I mean, it gets them some earlier. And then a guy like Stephen Hawking. People know the Ice Bucket Challenge, and they knew of him, maybe. How did that guy go so long? Was that technology on his side? Was that money on his side? Or was it just he just was lucky?
Well, we always say once you've seen one case of ALS, you've seen one case of ALS. Everyone's different. We've seen folks pass in 4 months. We've seen folks live for 20 years. But with Stephen Hawking, an example, his could have been a slower progressing. I don't know his entire story, but he also had a lot more resources maybe than most folks would to help with his daily living and the technology that he had and things like that. So I don't know for certain, but those are probably some things that help there.
So when that diagnosis does come in, heaven forbid, God forbid, I hope it doesn't come in. Anybody listening to this, anybody within the sound of my voice, I hope it never does. But what's the recommendation, Sarah? What do you? What's the kind of the checklist? What's the protocol here? What should people do?
Well, I always encourage people to. Definitely. Whatever your doctor's telling you, listen to that. I'm not a medical professional, but from a, just like daily living standpoint, I always encourage people to reach out to our care services team. So, you can find their contact information on our website, which is www.alsaiowa.org. But our care services team really, they just help people with their walk through this illness. They help them with equipment, with, resources, information about insurance, any issue you could see coming up with ALS. They've probably heard it before. And if they haven't, they'll do their best to find an answer for you. But we have support groups. We have, we have a relationship with a lot of clinics around the state. And then we also provide some financial assistance for people living with ALS. But I think the most important thing that I see is just that level of support that they give to people and answering questions. So instead of Googling something and getting like 2 billion responses, you can call them up and get a simple answer from people that have been there before and know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And, we've got the medical profession and scientists that are working on that side of ALS. You guys are more all about the money, and I mean that in a positive way. This requires money. And if people want to help, You're kind of the fun fundraising person is the way that I think of it. There's a number of ways really creative ways that you guys have come up with to raise money for battling this.
Well, I used to be the fun fundraising person. About 2 years ago, I switched over into a new part-time role where I'm now currently in charge of all of our volunteer engagement. And so we've really taken the opportunity to grow volunteerism at our chapter. In fact, in our office right now, we have 2 volunteers coming to help with just, different activities that we have and different projects that we have that allows our team to do more with less, which is awesome because the money's great, but I think time is so important too. And so when we're looking at human capital, time and money are just so important to us. But yes, back to your original question, we have a lot of different activities that we do throughout the year to try to raise money for our chapter. And just to be able to fund all those programs and services I talked about a few minutes ago, those aren't free. I mean, everybody thinks about, well, we got to keep the lights on and the doors open. Yes, but I think funding the programs and services is the number one thing we do. And it's just so important. And so some of those activities, those fundraising activities that you talked about, though, we have our Walk to Defeat ALS program, which raises the lion's share of the money that we bring in throughout the year. And our walks are just a ton of fun. Anybody that has an opportunity to go to one, we have all of them in the fall. And unfortunately, we've wrapped them all up this year. But next fall, you're welcome to join us across the state. We have 4 walks, Sioux City, Cedar Rapids, Quad Cities, and Des Moines. It's fun for the whole family. We encourage tailgating. We have bounce houses. We have face painters. We have balloon artists. We have bands at some of the walks. It's just like a really fun party that also happens to have a walk. And I've had so many people say, well, I don't think I can do the walk because it's, a couple miles. And I'm like, don't let that stop you from coming. Just come and have fun. Just be a part of the hope that's generated that day. So that's our biggest fundraising opportunity. But we also do ALS nights with various ball clubs across the state. So we have the Iowa Wild. Actually, that's happening on November 11th.
Hockey's always been a big partner, or big part of it. Wasn't the original Bucket Challenge, was that a hockey player or a lacrosse player?
He was a baseball player.
A baseball player,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the sports angle has always been big, yeah.
And then, of course, Lou Gehrig, was obviously kind of the jumping board for the minor league baseball teams to be a partner of ours. We're their number one charity of choice through minor league baseball. So we do ALS nights with the Iowa Cubs, the Cedar Rapids Colonels, the Quad City River Bandits. We do the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders, the hockey affiliate over there, and then the Iowa Wild over here. And then we also just, we've started to really focus on, supporting those third-party events, which would be like, let's say you wanted to have a golf tournament to raise money for us, and you were going to do the lion's share of the work, but we would help support you with different things. And so we started really seeing a lot of funding coming in through one in particular here in town. It's the Mike Myers Memorial Classic Golf Tournament.
Right.
And this year it raised, $130,000 for us.
Yeah, babe.
So there's lots of opportunities to get involved.
We did a hockey game.
Yeah, and George here did a hockey game for us.
And that worked out great. We raised several $1,000s for that. Also did a birthday party with music and all that kind of stuff. And the thing of it is, at my age particularly, you can't get me a gift that I really need or want.
Yeah.
So why not make a gift to this?
Yeah.
That's what I want. And people turned out and did that, and it was great.
And I think you bring up a really great point. When I was in development, what I would tell people when they were trying to think of like a fundraiser that they could do to support our chapter, I would always ask them like, well, what do you like to do? What's your favorite thing to do? And let's figure out a way to monetize that. Yeah. And it's simpler than people think. If you like to play hockey, let's do a hockey fundraiser. If you like to play bags, let's do a bags fundraiser. If you like to bake, let's do a bake sale. Like anything you like to do, we can figure out a way to make money off it for the chapter. And make it fun.
All right, so Josh, what's ahead? What do you see coming? What's coming down the pike as far as this battle against ALS is concerned, and the local branch here?
As far as things coming down the pipeline for, in the research front, we see things all the time coming through, whether it's on social media or from national. I do know there's a phase 3 trial that's starting, and that won't be completed until 2020. Phase 3 is when it starts to get really expensive because that's kind of the finish line where more and more people are coming into the fold from pharmaceuticals and things like that. So, but that's also the exciting time too, because that's when it's close, and once you get past that phase 2, you're kind of sprinting towards the end. But the technology front's also been moving quickly as well. People trying to figure out ways to make living a little bit easier for people with ALS and their families. For us locally, we're trying to continue to grow our programs and our services, and we have a great team to do that. Whether it's our fundraisers or our communications or engagement, and then our care services team. We've grown our programs substantially since the Ice Bucket Challenge, with offering more financial assistance. Being involved in those ALS clinics is huge. So you mentioned folks, if they're diagnosed, what to do.
Yeah.
Getting linked up with us is huge, but then also going to an ALS clinic, because it's been proven to extend their life and improve their quality of life as well.
What's a clinic?
So it's a multidisciplinary clinic. So we've got one at the University of Iowa, and then we also have a remote clinic over here in Johnston, which is a collaboration between the U of I, Unity Point, and Mercy. And that's kind of the first of its kind in the country to have 3 competing health organizations working together. And then the VA in Des Moines and Iowa City, because actually ALS is a service-connected disease. So veterans are actually twice as likely to develop ALS. So the VA is great to work with here in Iowa too. So a multidisciplinary clinic is where somebody with ALS would go into one room, and all the doctors and physicians would come see them one at a time. Because we were to give them a list of 15 doctors to go see, it'd be darn near impossible.
Right.
So they all come see them on one day at clinic, and they come every 3 months or 6 months, depending on the speed of their progression. So they'll see the neurologist, OT, PT, speech, nutrition, whatever they need to see at that visit, they'll see. So that's huge to get linked up with our ALS clinics. And then our care services team, we've added new programs like a caregiver learning lab, because we know caregivers sometimes get forgotten in this fight, and they need to take care of themselves as well. So we actually have some collaborations in the state with universities where they'll set up a car, a bathroom, a bedroom, and show caregivers how to transfer people with ALS, how to help get them from point A to point B, cleaning, feeding tubes, things like that, so that we can help educate them on how to take care of themselves and do things the proper way to help the people that they love. So things like that, we continue to grow, collaborate, and just do as much as we can to make things as easy as possible for people with ALS and their families.
Well, I've been looking forward to doing this program because it's very near and dear to my heart, and it makes me think of my dearly departed sister, Nancy Sue, and let's put a ribbon on this. Anything else in closing that you kind of the thought that you like to leave people with when it comes to the fight against ALS and your guys' efforts here with the ALS Association of Iowa?
I mean, mine would be like, any way you want to help, we'll take your help, whether you want to volunteer, whether you want to contribute financially, whether you want to, when I say volunteer, we have people in our office currently right now. If you hear anything in the background, that's what that is. Stuffing envelopes and helping with some physical labor projects. But we also love to have skilled volunteers. And so somebody that, like George here, who's been on a radio personality for years, giving us this opportunity to spread the word and things like that. But anybody that's in, marketing, we're currently looking to make a video about our chapter. If you're a videographer and you want, to do something nice for our chapter, that's a great way to get involved. We're looking for skilled volunteers as well. Board members, we're always looking for board members, and that's something Josh works really hard on, to cultivate a really robust board. If you want to help, you can help. Just get in touch with us. We will take any help we can get and any financial assistance we can get.
Yeah, that's great. Now, does that apply for everyone or just people within the state of Iowa? Or let's say, this goes out over the World Wide Web, obviously. Let's say you're living in Kentucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've actually been contacted by people that live all over the country before that say, I want to do this, bike ride in Idaho. And I forget why this person even contacted me, but there's a chapter that covers every single state. Some chapters cover multiple states. Iowa's kind of unique in that we just cover one state, but some chapters cover multiple states. But there is a way we can get you involved. And if you feel more comfortable to reach out to Josh and myself because you've heard us on this podcast, go ahead and do so. Otherwise, just Google ALS Association and plug in your state name afterwards, and something will come up. And I'm sure that they will, just like Josh and myself, take any help we can get.
Great. Well done. That's Sarah Letow. She's the engagement coordinator now for ALS of Iowa. We've also been talking to Josh Nuss. He's the executive director. Thank you. Thank you both. Good luck. I hope we get some victories here. I don't want ALS to remain undefeated.
We think its time is coming to an end, and the Ice Bucket Challenge was just the beginning of the end of ALS, is what we like to say. We have a lot of work to do, so just because it was a really good year in 2014 doesn't mean we still don't need folks' help, whether it's through volunteering or fundraising or raising more awareness. That the fight's still going, but good things are happening. So hope is there, and if somebody on this podcast is been diagnosed with ALS or know somebody with ALS, we're here for you. Reach out. We'll be there with you every step of the way.
Oh, that's great. That's a great way to end. So, ALS of Iowa, thanks again, everybody, and thanks for listening in to another podcast by George.